So let's talk a little bit about leadership and how do great leaders encourage creative thinking within their organizations?
I think you got to de-risk it for the creatives. You got to take as much of the fear out of it, much as the sense of risk out of it as possible. So you can't have people be truly creative and bold if you're going to punish them for it not working, right? And you, especially from a position of a leader within an organization, have got to swallow hard and go into, whether if you're at an agency, to go into your client, or if you're at a company, go into your boss and stand with them shoulder to shoulder and say, I believe in this. And so we had a great example. I mentioned this thing that we did for Quest, I don't know, it was probably 2003, 2004, where they wanted to refresh their brand among young people. This was a sleepy mountain, Arbok, the Quest, and it was their parents' brand. And we did a lot of research and found, well, the kids did not like Quest, but they didn't think it was for them. And the whole idea was sort of engage them about their mobile offerings. So they hired SS+K to somehow create a connection with young people about their brand. And they fully expected us to come in, it was about a $3 million budget if I remember. They fully expected us to come in and say, spend $2.4 million in media, do a lot of radio, do some online, and we'll come up with some creative with the, so we'll spend $600,000 in producing creative, and then we'll blast it out there with $2.4 million. And we did the math on that and realized they were spending like $50, $60 million advertising on TV to grown-ups. So our piddly little $3 million was not going to do anything to convince these young people that Quest was for them. So we actually flipped it over and said, let's do something. Let's spend a large chunk of that budget, $2.5 million, doing something meaningful and engaging and entertaining for young people, and then let's promote it with whatever's left. And we created this amazing, with Dennis Crowley, who founded Foursquare, and Kevin Slavin's wonderful game developer, this terrific team. They came up with this big urban game that involved semicodes, which at the time, I think we were the first people to actually use a cell phone as a scanner. Found a guy up in Toronto who had invented this way of basically having a camera, a cell phone, which we all do now, scan semicodes, posted them all over a city, and created a whole game around kids discovering these semicodes that were hidden and moving these big inflatable game pieces around a city.
So cool.
So what we did was like the circus. Yeah. In fact, we actually borrowed the page from the circus, which was do something, give people a show, and then promote the show, and use that as a way of engaging young people. And so we won a bunch of awards, but really was a way of showing, for me, it was a lesson in creativity. We had to swallow hard and walk into a client and say, we're going to do something that you never in a million years would have considered, and we're going to ask you to spend 80% of your budget on something that's completely unproven. And the leaders had to go in and stand side by side with the creatives to pitch that. Right. And that's, to me, is how you just can't talk about it. You actually have to commit to it.
And be clear about the direction you want to take someone where they haven't gone before.
Exactly.
Right. So on the flip side, are there mistakes, or is there one particular kind of mistake that time and again leaders of companies and teams seem to make the most?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretending to be something you're not, adopting a style that's not yours. I used to laugh with my partners at SS+K because I kind of grew into the partnership. I started as a senior associate, and over the course of 10 years, 5 or 10 years, grew into being a partner. And for a long time, I would get my annual review, and they would say, you're doing great, and talent and all this other business, but you really need to be harder on people. You need to break some china. You need to show people, who's boss, and be willing to manage in that way as well. And which I never did, because I wasn't comfortable with it. That wasn't my style. But more than anything else, I didn't think that people would respond particularly well for that. I think people, if I had all of a sudden started throwing chairs around a room people would have looked at me like, what in the hell is he doing? Like, what got into him? It's just not, it wasn't credible. It wasn't available to me, that part of management. And after a while, they just stopped, and we joked about it years later, which is like, oh yeah, I remember. So for me, I do see leaders sort of take a wrong turn when all of a sudden they're trying to be something that doesn't come naturally to them. So my lesson there is be yourself and figure out the management style that fits your personality, as opposed to reading a book and saying, I got to do what Jack Welch did.
Right.
Or whoever.
For Jack, right?
It would work for Jack. I mean, he had the personality. You see him on TV now, he still has the personality. So go for it. Lean into it.
So creativity, leading with a purpose. Yeah. Not throwing chairs around if it's not you. What else is part of the makeup that's made you successful at what you do?
Well, just riffing on that a little bit, I think, I certainly took from a couple things from my parents. One, from my mother, just be nice, the golden rule, treat people how you want to, up and down the line. So managing up and really trying to be empathic with people who you're reporting to and understanding what their situation is, and respecting that connection in treating them how you would want to be treated if you were in their position. In the same way, managing your peers and managing down. So your ability to sort of manage up and down and sideways, I think, is critical, and something I worked on a lot, is try to figure out the best way to connect with everyone and respect them for what they do and look for the good things that they do. Certainly let them know when they need to improve on other things, but try to base it on what they do well. So that's one thing. For my father, I think I got a couple of great lessons, but one of them was don't be intimidated by anybody. It doesn't matter if you're meeting with Bill Gates or someone at a startup or a professor from MIT who's 1,000 times smarter than you. You're in that room for a reason with them. Presume that they want to meet you and that they want to learn about you. Look them in the eye, shake their hand, look them in the eye, and try to connect with them on that level. I think those are two critical lessons that, life lessons that I've tried to bring to my career as well.